Home Trails podcast presented by me, Ultra Running Sam. Now, this podcast is part of the Home Trails media entity that encompasses our Home Trails documentaries. You may have seen them on YouTube, so where we interview famous ultra runners from around the world and in the UK at the moment. We film them on the trail and in the home, obviously, Home Trails. Get those insights into their training, big races they've done, and then just their background information. Try and dig a bit deeper into what motivates them to go and do these amazing things that they do. Also, part of Home Trails is new for this year is our live podcast coming from big races. You may have seen us at the Spine Race in January. We were there doing our thing all week. Later on in the summer, we will be at the Lap in the Lake District, and then keep your eyes peeled for other races where we'll be popping up and doing media coverage for some big races, hopefully. So, obviously, we have a podcast now, so we'll keep doing this every week. Keep churning out the podcasts with famous runners and people in the industry, anyone that we can get on that we feel that you might be interested in related to trail running and ultra running. So on with our guest. Okay, so welcome to the Home Trails podcast, Lily Canter and Emma Wilkinson.
Hello. All together now.
After three, all together now. Yeah, welcome. Apologies to begin with because it's taken us a while to get to this. My bad scheduling and then school holidays and my work. But we're finally here, and I've read the book, so there's no excuses. So we're here and we're ready to talk about ultra women. So when did the book actually come out?
May the 6th or was it the 8th?
Okay,
The
8th of May. We had a couple of book launches, so we were sort of leading into it for a couple of days. So it's been out, it'll be coming up to a month soon of being out in the world.
Brilliant. That's cool. So for the viewers, obviously not the listeners, I'm just going to hold there's the you've probably got copies sat next to you, have you, to hold up, rather than me holding up just a picture. There you go. That's even better.
Yeah.
The actual real deal.
Look for the bright orange cover in your bookshelf. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It's good. No, it's nice. Eye-catching colour. So obviously we're going to dive into this book in detail, but firstly, the question, because you're new guests on the podcast, I have to ask the superhero question. So I have prompted you, but it was only a minute ago. So hopefully you thought about your superhero origin story. So firstly, then Emma. So obviously the superhero question is all superheroes have an origin story. So what is your origin story? How did you go from being normal run-of-the-mill Emma to being co-author on a book about ultra running and an ultra runner yourself? What's your origin story? How did you get to where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, on the running, so I'm a journalist. I normally write about health and medicine, actually. But yeah, on the running side of things, I've always run, sort of since my 20s. As a grown-up, I've always run. But I suppose half marathon type distance. And it was, in fact, I do really remember my family sort of, I think I was watching the London Marathon on TV and going, oh, I'd really like to do that. And they all just burst out laughing. And none of them remember this at all. They will deny it until they are blue in the face, but they laughed at me. And I was like, right, I'm going to do this. And so I started doing half marathons, and I was so terrible at it at first, like so terrible. I had no idea what I was doing. But that meant that I set quite a low baseline, so I could really improve each time by a lot. We moved back from London. I live in Sheffield, and I joined a running club. So I'd always just kept doing it. I was doing a bit more trail running. And then Lily and I had met at university doing our journalism degree, and we'd sort of always stayed in touch. And then we ended up doing some teaching together at university. And I'll let her tell her own story, but we started end up doing kind of running together. But it was Lily who got me into the ultra distances, I have to say. I'd only done one road marathon and found it really hard and tough. That was before I had children. I've got 3 young children. Running became about escape then after having the children, so I was really happy to get out. It just really needed it. And yeah, it was Lily that convinced me that I could do ultra distances. And I was really skeptical, but I will generally go along with what ideas that Lily has and then just figure it out afterwards. And I was like, oh, I prefer this. I can actually do this. I can run slower for longer and I have more fun. And I really like these events. And this is what I want to do. So I'm still quite early into my kind of ultra running journey. We did a kind of, we've done a couple of 100K 2 day events. I've done like 50 miler, kind of lots of distances in between. Um, so now it's about setting myself new challenges because after writing the book and obviously hearing the stories from all these amazing women, I'm like, right, what next? What next? So yeah, and I'll let Lily tell you about how the book came about along with her superhero story.
So she's blaming you then, Lily, isn't she?
Yeah, she tends to do that. Well, it's probably true though. I kind of, whenever I step into anything, I'm like, try and drag Emma along with me. Yeah, so I came to running very late, I would say, probably my mid-30s. I think after my first child. I've never been really that active. I suppose I played netball, and I always enjoyed swimming, but I started to run basically so I'd be fitter for netball. That was kind of the real reason. I didn't really enjoy it. And I hated it so much in the beginning that I actually ended up joining a triathlon club because I thought that would be more interesting, and I enjoyed the swimming part of it.
Really? You enjoyed the swimming part? That's the bit that everybody
Yeah,
hates.
I know. I like swimming, but I'm not fat. The problem is I'm really, really slow. And so it soon became apparent that I might enjoy it, but a lot of the races had cut-offs. And that was going to be a bit of an issue. And I soon realized I absolutely hated cycling, like with a passion. I mean, I don't mind mountain biking. You know, that's fun, and I guess it's kind of like the trail running equivalent, but road cycling is just the most awful thing on the planet. But I had a really good running coach in this triathlon club, and that basically turned running around for me. And I had done a half marathon and hated it. And within 6 months of being in the triathlon club, I did another half marathon and I knocked 30 minutes off my time. Wow. And it was just because I had really good coaching and I kind of knew what I was doing. I wasn't just going out and like plodding every single run. And I learned that there was a lot of variability. And I suppose my sort of journey into ultras was very much accidental. So I'd done a 20-mile race and I was interested to kind of see how far I could go and if I could get close to a marathon. So I signed up for a looped event, one of the Big Bear events in the Midlands.
Oh yeah, I know them, yeah.
Yeah, and I ended up doing 30 miles, which was never my intention at all. I was sort of aiming for about 22, 23. But it opened my eyes to how doable it was to do longer distances if you kind of had regular stops and were eating along the way. And I realized it was actually just a nice kind of extended picnic. And that's, I think, when I sort of said to Emma, do you know what, it's not actually that bad. So we started doing some races together. We don't live near each other. I'm down in Leicestershire, so we'd kind of meet up at races. And again, I'm a journalist as well, so it was kind of during these races that, you know, we were just kind of chatting and trying to pass the time, and we started to think about books and book ideas and what we wanted to write about. And we approached a publisher and knocked around a few ideas and eventually kind of settled on this idea of why is it that women seem to be so good at long distance events, but we don't really seem to know an awful lot about it, and we don't really hear many of their stories. And it kind of evolved from there, really. And we started to kind of dig into other sports as well, not just running. Running was kind of what we knew. We'd experienced ourselves in races that we didn't seem to get as tired. Like, we were very much middle of the pack, but we were less tired than the men in the middle of the pack. and we were finding ourselves sort of pulling ahead of them towards the sort of latter stages of races. So we just were kind of really interested in this whole idea of like, you know, why is it that women seem to be very good at long distances? And can we kind of dig into the science and the stories behind that?
That's interesting. Just going back to the superhero question, I think you've kind of brushed over your own ultra running sort of achievements a little bit.
Yeah, trying to fit so much in. Yeah, so I guess, yeah, so I've done all the ones Emma's mentioned, and then so my longest has been 100k. So I did a 100k race last year, which was a small local race, and I was first female in that race. It was the first time I kind of run competitively, and it did like really stress me out. I did not like being in first place because it meant I had to hold on to it, and yeah, it was a completely different experience. But I've done multi-days is kind of the thing I enjoy the most. So I did a couple of years ago, I did Ultra X Tanzania, which is a 5-day 250k race, which I absolutely loved. And I've just come back recently from Beyond the Ultimate Highlands, which is a 3-day race.
That's the one I was thinking of, yeah, recently.
Yeah. And that again was, I did run it competitively, and but I kind of learned to slightly to more enjoy that now, like not get stressed out from it, kind of just go along for the ride. For the second female in that race, which I was not expecting going into it, but once I found myself in that position, I kind of wanted to retain it. So yeah, and Emma and we've signed up for Equinox 24 in September.
Oh yeah.
And we're going to do it solo, and we basically each want to kind of go further than we've gone before, and we think that's kind of quite a sort of safe and straightforward format to do it in, although, you know, the 10k loops for 24 hours will be an interesting challenge.
Soul destroying.
Or it can be a kind of what I've found with looped events, and I've only done like up to about 7 hours, is that it makes it easier in a way, because you're like, just one more loop.
Yeah.
So
because those big bear events, some of those are timed looped events, aren't they? Is that what you did?
Yeah.
Which one? Because there's one near me that I did at Rossliston Forestry Centre. So I live just outside of Derby, and it's
okay.
So which one did you do then in Leicestershire?
Well, I did one in Northamptonshire. I did Salsey Forest.
That's the one I'm thinking of.
Yeah, I did Beacon Hill a couple of months ago as a bit of a training run with my dog. In fact, I've done Salsey Forest twice because I've done it with my dog as well. I also got a dog to run with and do ultras with. So
handy.
Yeah, he likes the big bear events. They're dog friendly.
Amazing. So my question was going, you kind of answered it, but my main question was going to be why did you decide to write this book? And I know you've probably sort of already touched on that, but what was the main sort of driving force where you've got to get this book out there? Is it to do with the fact that there's not at the minute, but over the last few years, there's been attention has sort of finally been put on women's ultra running, and is it all just part of the culmination of that you felt that this book had to be written?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously Jasmin Paris won the Spine, and we'd heard about that. We knew how amazing she was, and I think we just sort of entered this world at that time. But actually, when you start to look into it, you realize that while you might have heard of Jasmin Paris, there are so many other women that you've not heard of. There are cyclists who've won events that you've not heard of, and swimming is a whole other kind of sport that really opened our eyes to the advantages that women have there. And it just felt like this was so more than just a feature. You would find these kind of odd articles trying to delve into it, but there was just so much more that needed to be said. And you go into a bookshop and there are lots of books about running and they're all written by men. And we just wanted to kind of redress that balance a bit, I think. and come at it not writing about ourselves and our own kind of experience, but coming at it from a journalist point of view, like doing that research, doing those interviews,
Yeah.
doing a really big deep dive. And it was such a huge undertaking, actually. And I think both of us are quite relieved that we did it together because it just grew and grew and grew as we were doing it. It became such a huge piece of work
Yeah.
with the amount of research. And I mean, everyone was so excited to talk to us about this. It wasn't hard to find people to chat to us at all.
Yeah, that was the thing that, you know, I was so impressed with the book, is like the level of detail that you've gone to, like with these interviews and the research on stuff is just like, and I know I've sort of dived into the history of ultra running myself with, you know, the pedestrianism and everything, but I just thought that was great how you'd sort of gone back that far, and it wasn't just a case of like, here's Jasmin Paris, look what she's done. The like women's running is amazing. You've like literally gone back to the beginning of like ultra running as a sport when it was, you know, known as something else, but it's always been there. And how I couldn't get over the fact that all the information you found out about um how there was this sort of, it was just normal that women did these things and these sports and stuff. And I, something that shocked me was like the bit that you wrote about the FA banning women's football. I'm like, how in my naivety, thinking that women's football was like was like a new thing that had just been going, and a lot of attention's been on that because of the lines and everything. Um, but the fact that you know, they've got like sellout stadiums of like 40,000 people going to see women's football back in the third 20s and 30s, would it have been?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then for it to then be decided that it was something that wasn't proper for women to do.
Yeah.
Um, and you realize that this, like all through these like periods of time, women have always been doing these amazing things, and men have got in the way of doing it, haven't they, basically, and tried to stop them from doing it.
Yeah, and I think those history chapters were really hard to write because there were actually lots of stories that didn't make it in because they just couldn't. It would just have become a history book
Yeah.
had we done that. Um, and I think what's telling is that all the way along, you know, these, you know, whether it be the dawn of the modern Olympics or whatever kind of period of history you're talking about, all the way along, there were women who were battling to have their place
Mm,
in that sport or in that arena and showing that they could do it, doing it alongside or, you know, just doing it in their own way. And men saying, no, you can't, you're too weak, even though they were doing even though they were doing it and showing that they could do it. There's a lot of pseudoscience and kind of nonsense about what women were
mm,
capable of that I think has taken such a long time to unpick. And I think we're still unpicking it in some ways. And I think the thing that really shocked me was, and I sort of knew this in the back of my mind, but when you're writing it, you're going into a whole other level, was that the first women's marathon in the Olympics wasn't until 1984. It's
mm.
like that is in my lifetime. How just
Wow.
that it took that long to kind of, yeah,
Mm,
get to the point where, yeah, women are not all going to collapse and die if you let them do a marathon. But you saw it across so many different sports. I mean, you kind of saw it with pedestrianism. Women were really good at that, but they were seen as circus freaks, and
yeah.
um, they were kind of having to ignore and counter a lot of abuse for doing
Yeah.
it. So,
And fire a gun while they
and
were.
fire a gun for their own safety while they're doing, yeah, exactly. So,
Oh,
yeah,
I thought that
I
was
loved her.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other story that I thought was interesting, was how, you know, the history of like with the Olympics and everything, how there was the women's games anyway, how
Mm.
that was already a thing that, um and the statue and everything, and obviously men had to have their part of that, where they had to wear a robe with one boob out, obviously, because that's what the men probably demanded at the time,
Yeah.
um for them. um and all that sort of stuff is kind of lost in history, isn't it? That you don't you don't hear those stories being told, do you? And the fact that you're telling it now in the book is great. The other one that made me laugh was the women that did the pram race from London to Brighton. I thought
Yeah.
that was amazing that
Yeah.
that she was like so frustrated that she wanted to do something and be, you know, fed up with being told you can't do this and you can't do that, and they did it, and they all did it in great time as well, didn't they?
Yeah, it's fantastic. If you think about the kind of London to Brighton ultra these
Yeah.
days and how everybody's lining up in their expensive gear, and like
Mm.
these women were just in their normal clothes, normal shoes, big skirts, kind of cumbersome outfits, really
Mm.
pushing babies in prams and cracking on just to
Yeah.
prove that they could.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And they could, and they absolutely could. So obviously, yeah, I've taken screenshots of the digital version, and so excuse me while I'm like rifling through my notes. Um, but there was one of the things. Obviously it begins with Jasmin Paris and the spine. So the book sort of begins with that. And that's a story that, you know, my connections to the spine race. I know that story sort of inside out. But this was something that resonated with me, and I'll quote it from the book. So for people that haven't sort of read it, this is the bit that sort of stood out to me. It says to the ultra and fell running communities, however, so talking about obviously about her result of winning that race outright. For the ultra and fell runner communities, however, the race result was no surprise. Insiders knew that Jasmin Paris was the runner to beat, but outside of this enclave, a more sexist narrative prevailed. Society at large assumed that men would always beat women at athletic endeavours. After all, women were physically weaker and not built for such extreme challenges. Suddenly, Paris had turned this belief on its head by winning the race outright. And I thought that really sort of touched on something that us in the sport, we understand, you know, how Jasmine can do that, and we fully expect her to do things like that. But the sort of we sometimes we forget that the general public still have that view, that sexist view, that men are better than women, and that a woman could know there's no way that a woman could beat a man in a race. But that's something that maybe I take for granted because I've been in the sport for I don't know, like 12, 13 years, something like that now. I've been doing ultras, maybe longer. And I've always known that women are as good as men, if not better, at longer races. So for me, Jasmine doing that wasn't a surprise. And when she did what she did at Barkley, that wasn't a surprise to me. But it seems like the whole world still is living, you know, like 200 years ago, basically.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that theme kind of crops up throughout the book. So, you know, we were talking about the football, but you know, if you look at tennis as well, there's like this assumption that women can only play 3 sets and men can play 4. Yeah, in a lot of tournaments, women are playing 5 sets, so they are actually already doing it. We know they can do it, but there is just this constant like male gaze in sport that just doesn't highlight, you know, what women are capable of to the outside world. And I think we had to keep reminding ourselves of that as we were writing it, that like, yeah, some of this stuff is like really obvious to us because we're in this world, but we've got to remember that people outside, you know, they may have heard of Jasmin Paris, but they certainly won't have heard of many of the other women in the book. And it was, what was interesting as well was kind of going outside of running and looking at cycling and swimming and multi-sport events. Was we were less familiar with those, but there was still these kind of concepts of like ultra endurance and where women were particularly strong, and that kind of bled into the other sports as well. But yeah, I think there's another line, I think it's in that chapter as well, about yeah, Jasmine, you know, was kind of capable of doing this, but no one would be watching, like the world just didn't know, and hadn't really kind of been interested. And that's certainly, you know, it's changing now, but it's still, you know, when these stories come up in the press, there's still always that kind of, oh wow, a woman's broken a man's record. How can that
Yeah.
be?
Yeah.
And there's still, women that are, called out for cheating. When Lyle Wilcox won the Trans Am cycle across America, people were claiming she'd been cheating. When Lynn Cotts swam across the English Channel, breaking the overall record, they told her that she was lucky because she had good conditions. So, there's always this kind of rebuttal when women do kind of do something that's seen as extraordinary, rather than that kind of general acceptance of, yeah, of course they can do this.
Yeah, that was another bit that I'd highlighted as well, about when the news about Jasmin with Barkley had come out, how journalists had sort of implied that she'd only finished because she was helped by a man, because of that, the decision where like he gave her the choice of which direction she wanted to go in, and instead of it being like, should have been a story about a respect for a fellow runner, but it turned into, oh, he obviously like helped her out with that.
Yeah, and I don't think that was the intention of the angle of that article. But I think again, it's that they weren't kind of aware of the implication, and that's the problem again. It was written by a male reporter who was trying to just show this sportsmanship moment, but actually what it was implying was she only did it because a man helped her. And again, I think we sometimes just need to step back and kind of be more aware of the way in which we're portraying things. And I thought the documentary, one of the documentaries about the Barkley and Jasmin Paris, covered it really well, and they had footage of that, and what they actually showed was he would have done that whether she was a man or a woman. It seemed just like in the moment he just wanted to support the other runner, and that came across really well in the film, but I think some of the news articles didn't really capture that.
No, it's tricky, obviously I am a man, and for me, personally, I find it quite difficult. I'm always trying to sort of do my best and not say things that I shouldn't say, and I still get picked up on things that I that I fully didn't intend to say, or something that may have come across that I've implied. I know that, for example, at this year's Spine race in January, I went and did a load of podcasts from the race. And one of the episodes I did was sort of like pre-race interviews with people. So what I was doing was going and sort of grabbing people after they'd gone to kit check, and then sort of dragging them off to a makeshift studio and just quizzing them about the race and stuff. But the problem was that I was sort of at the bottom of the pecking order, so all of the brands were there speaking to their people that were just done kit check and were preparing for the race. The official media team, which I was kind of part of, but I was working independently, they were getting their interviews with them. So I was kind of like last bottom of the list for grabbing people for interviews. So I just grabbed whoever was willing to come and be interviewed by me, and I managed to get a few people in. But unbeknownst to me, I'd not realised this until afterwards, was that out of all the people that I'd managed to sort of drag in and get to interview, I'd only interviewed like 2 women. So I put this episode out, and one of the first comments about it was, for all the hype about this year's race being about the women, why have you only interviewed 2 women? And I had to kind of defend myself and sort of say this wasn't intentional. This was just purely the fact that only 2 women had the energy left to sort of come and talk to me. It could have been the same with the men as well, but that was just the situation I was in. And I was like, I was really sort of hurt by it, thinking that people sort of thought that I'd done that intentionally, that I didn't want to interview women for the race, that it was all about the men for me, and that isn't the case, because like I've said before, for anyone that sort of looks at my podcast, you realise that actually I probably interview more women than men, actually, to be honest, if you count them up. and that's not intentional in any way. It's just the way that it's worked out. For me, a great performance is a great performance, whether it's a man or a woman. It doesn't make any difference to me. So I'll interview anyone. But I feel as a man in trail and ultra running media, I sort of do feel a little bit of pressure to kind of get it right, and I know that I don't always get it right, or I might come across as if I don't get it right. What's your advice for me?
Well, I mean, I think we all do it to a certain extent because it's how we're conditioned to like. And I think Lily and I have got a super antennae for this now, which we didn't before. And it's through writing the book. It's because once you start noticing it, you notice it
Mm,
everywhere. But I think on a completely separate example, so I write about science and health a lot, and a few years ago I just did a bit of an audit to see kind of who I was interviewing and started to notice that I had a lot more male scientists and doctors in my articles, and none of that was intentional, and I wouldn't have told you. And sometimes it's a case of who answers the phone and who's there and who's
yeah.
available.
Mm,
So I had to make that conscious effort to redress that balance, but also
mm,
things like people from different places in the country, and just to get just like a mix of voices into the work that I was doing. So I think, um, so I completely understand that it's not always easy to get right, and
mm,
sometimes the it is harder to kind of get those different voices, for example, in coverage, etc. I think being aware of it, which you are, is the like that's all you can do, right?
start.
If it's just on your radar, um, because it's about trying to change it overall rather than piece by piece or example by example, I think. I don't know if Lily would have any other separate advice for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always difficult. We know as journalists that in an ideal world, you want to have like a diverse range of sources and voices in your stories, but actually, you're time pressured. You will just go to the person who is going to respond straight away. Um, and yeah, it's difficult to break those habits as well, and it can be difficult to find these people. But I mean, the whole kind of problem in ultra running is there just aren't enough women doing it, therefore you've got a smaller pool of
Mm,
people to talk to in the first place anyway. And
mm,
then when you're trying to kind of hit other like diversity, you might find that you just can never win. You can just never keep everyone happy, you can never represent everybody. But like Emma says, it's about being aware of it, and trying to do what you can. And when none of us are going to kind of be perfect at it all the time.
yeah.
Um,
I think I
but
think I think it is moving away from. So when I first came into ultra running, it was very much middle-aged white males that were ultra runners, and but even in my over the last decade, even I've noticed that it is actually swinging the other way now, and there is, although women are underrepresented in races, that's still a thing, isn't it? Although there are some races. So I recently went to the lap in the Lake District, that race around Windermere, and speaking to the race director, he was saying it's almost 50-50 with men and women in that race, and that's because he's made it so sort of inviting to sort of new ultra runners. And I couldn't, when I was interviewing people there, I couldn't get over the fact that sort of it felt like sort of 60 to 70% of the people that I interviewed had never done an ultra before, and it was literally their first race. Um, so I don't know, maybe maybe it's part of the problem is races as well that sort of put people off. I know that people have sort of criticised some of the big ultras in this country as being sort of given themselves taglines that put people off. I don't know whether what your sort of take on that is.
Yeah, I mean, the first race that we signed up to was actually in Romania that never happened because of COVID, but we thought we might as well get a nice holiday out of it at the same time and, go somewhere different and interesting. But one of the reasons we chose that one was because no cut-off times. Like we knew even things went really wrong, you could walk it and you'd be fine. And it was sort of marketed as a kind of a good first ultra to have a go at, and it was very supported, and the team very supported, and etc. And I think we perhaps didn't even need that level of kind of gentle entry into it, because in the end we did our own self-supported same 100k kind of 2-day event. Well, not even event, it was just the two of us challenge round Wales. So yeah, so I think perhaps we could do more than we gave ourselves credit for when we first started. But I think people do need that entry point. If you don't know anyone who's done an ultra and you've never seen it, and all you see are kind of videos of kind of very muscly men running up and down technical trails, it is going to be off-putting if you've not done that. If you're like me and you've mainly done road half marathons, you're going to be a bit like, the imposter syndrome is going to take over, isn't it? So yeah, I mean, I think people are, race directors, this is something that they are thinking about. We're very aware that this is something, an issue that they're very conscious of, and I think some are doing better than others at it.
Yeah.
And you can see it. Sorry, you can see it when, like you say, like with the lap, and I was marshalling at a local race a couple of weeks ago, and they had 50-50 men and women. It was the first time they'd reached that. But they've got a female race director who has deliberately been trying to attract more women. So when races do put measures in place, and a lot of it is the stuff that's sort of outlined by She Races, so there's literally a guide there on how to do it. They can attract 50-50. And yeah, a lot of it is the language, the imagery, I think, is huge as well, the types of images. It's not just women, lots of images of women. It's the sort of, it's the size and the shapes and the ages and the ethnicities of those women. That will make a difference as well. And there's some countries that are doing, New Zealand, a lot of their ultras are 50-50, because they're doing the right thing. So it is possible to get it right, but some races still are dragging their feet, or they just don't see it. That's the thing. They just don't see that it's an issue.
Yeah, and obviously you've got like Sophie Power with she races, isn't it? Doing really good work with that, in there, that she's sort of set that up so that races can, because at first she was sort of sending out guidelines, wasn't she? But now races are going to her, aren't they, and just sort of saying what should we be doing. So over, I suppose, given a sort of longer time scale, I suppose things have got to get better, haven't they, as time goes on?
You would hope. I mean, if you look at the stats in the UK in ultra running, there was actually a bit of a dip. I think the stats last year showed it went down a bit after kind of climbing for a number of years. So I guess it is going to be this kind of up, peaks and troughs. But yeah, gradually improving. And actually, running is a lot better than, if you look at long distance cycling, there are hardly any women doing that at all. So I think, things are improving. And I think the other thing, and I think what Sophie's really pleased with now, is that it's not just her advocating for women. It's got to a point now where women are advocating for themselves. So if they notice that the imagery on a website is very male focused, they'll contact the race company and let them know. And men are doing it as well. So people are kind of noticing these things and calling them out and speaking to race directors. So yeah, definitely that awareness is spreading, and I think people feel more kind of comfortable raising these issues now.
Yeah, definitely. The other thing I wanted to talk about in the book is that, you make a good point about with the sort of manifesto and everything, about talking about what can be done, and changes to things like media coverage of women's racing. And you sort of picked up on something that I was familiar with what happened with Corinne Malcolm at UTMB, and how she was sort of disgusted at the fact that everybody basically went home, didn't they? And she stayed behind to sort of make sure that the top 10 women had all the coverage, that the same amount of media coverage that the top 10 men got.
Yeah, and again, it's quite outstanding, really, that is just not happening. That is just not the norm at all. That she was going above and beyond by doing that. So yeah, it's still a massive issue.
I
The
suppose
coverage.
it's not all races, is it? I suppose because just thinking about the one time that I went out to Western States and did I ran a follow cam at the finish, and I was so happy that I was allowed to sort of run in the top 10 men and the top 10 women. So I sort of did like a big shift covering everybody until literally the first 10 men were in and the first 10 women were in, and they were celebrated as much as the men when they came in, with media coverage and everything. So, but then you contrast that to UTMB, that's such a massive, circus. But I suppose not all races are different, aren't they? And you suppose you can't really, I don't know, we can't really judge them all by the same standards, can we? I don't know. But
Yeah, I mean,
obviously over time.
with the manifesto, I think there's lots of different points in there, but every single part comes down to equality, essentially. So it's just asking for equal coverage. Just make that standard. We shouldn't need to call it out
Mm,
in 2025. Same for the research. So it's kind of still absolutely amazing to me that so much sports science research is done
yeah.
only in men, and then
Mm,
those women are expected to just use those results and base their training and their fueling and all their plans on science that was done in someone with a different physiology to
mm,
them. So we don't even know if
mm,
something is the same or not the same. And we talk about a review that was done of all the research, and kind of these two reviews done a decade apart of how much sports science research included women, and there hadn't been a shift. It just hadn't changed. And I think again, that's another area where there is more awareness now. But I think the time for excuses is over. It's no good saying, well, it's more complicated to do a study in women, or there aren't enough women, or no women signed up to my study. Like, why is that? Why is it that that's happening? That's something that's to do with your recruitment. Like, it should just be a standard that you are, including everybody in that
mm,
study. Um, so yeah, I think there are so many things in the points that we make in the manifesto, whether it's about research or kit or media coverage or any of it, that's just about equality, really. If we just had people taking that extra step to think about how to make it fair, then yeah, we would know and understand so much more about women's endurance ability, because more women would be doing it, more women, and we'd have better data, basically.
yeah. What's your sort of so out of all those points on the manifesto, what are the ones that you're sort of think should be happening, like like straight away? I'm going to
Actual point, yeah.
We're quickly getting it up in front of
quizzing you
us
on your
now.
book now. Which are the more sort of not important, because they're all obviously as equally important, but which ones do you personally feel like should be being sorted first, or what could be sort of a not the low hanging fruit, basically, of what could be sort of tackled first?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah. Come on, Emma.
well, I was just going to say, I think the female-specific sport endurance research could be tackled quite easily. Like, funding bodies and ethics committees could make it part of the requirement for doing the study
Mm,
that you're including males and females in your studies, or at least balancing out by doing an equivalent study in female
mm,
participants. Because I think, what's the point in getting more women to sign up to ultras to do it if then they don't have much information on how best to prepare for that race or train for that race or fuel for that race through their different life stages as well, kind of after having children, perimenopause, menopause, etc. Like, it's so key to doing well at this sport that you're trying to encourage them to take part in, because actually they might surprise themselves on how capable they are at that sport. They just never realized. So I think that's one that really, and you know, my background is science, so that's one that really stands out for me, I think. And I think it's so easily solvable. There are guidelines that were published, you know, in the past 5 years that tell you how to do those studies and do them well.
Yeah, amazing. Lily, what's your sort of standout thing from the list?
Yeah, I mean, it does all feed back to the research, but I think for me, because I coach, the sort of female specific training guidelines, I think if we had that research, then that would inform the training and the coaching. And you know, I find so many women have kind of found some generic plan online, and it's just so not suitable for a woman. And it's still happening now. I mean, we cover this in the book with Anne Trayson when she was training. Like, she had all these plans that were designed for men, and she soon realized like they just didn't suit her, and she had to kind of devise her own training. And we don't differentiate. We don't sort of say here's a male plan and a female plan, or this is a plan for someone going through perimenopause. It's basically, this is what a young white male should be capable of doing. So there's just not that nuance there. So I think, yeah, for me as a coach, being able to have that female specific training would, you know, be a really big game changer.
Yeah, the mind kind of boggles with that, really, that you know, that people have been training for running for years, and there's so many books have been written about training and stuff, but it's still at that point where there's people are still dishing out training plans, like generic training plans for people that, you know, is, like you say, it's meant for a male, and it doesn't take into account, you know, because I know my wife Kate just recently did a half marathon, and she was training for that, and you know, she was coming to me for advice, but you know, I had to say to her that, you know, I've coached before, I've coached men and women, but I always found it really difficult to coach women. And although you have you know, you'll obviously know this, Lily, you have to build a relationship with somebody. It's like a friendship, isn't it, that you get to know somebody when you're coaching them. And it always felt a bit awkward to me to sort of go to that next level of wanting to sort of find out about cycles and where they were, and how, you know, energy levels at certain times of the month and stuff. And it always just felt like a bit intrusive for me as a male to sort of have those conversations. But I was having those conversations with my wife when she was training for this, and just sort of saying, you know, I don't feel like equipped enough to be able to sort of dish out information to you, even though you're my wife and we talk about these things. And that's just because the resources, you know, they haven't been there, have there, for all these years? It's been like males programming males for running, but obviously that's something that's changing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Although I think, I mean, a lot of the information out there is quite contradictory still, because there's just still not enough data. But yeah, there's lots of things we are kind of more aware of. RED-S, you know, is something that it does affect men and women, but women are more susceptible to it. And yeah, the sort of research is emerging, but it's even just, again, it's that kind of awareness and recognition. So as a coach, thinking, right, I can't just have a one size fits all approach to everyone. And a decent coach shouldn't. They should be kind of making, you know, their plans, you know, bespoke for each person. But I think there also needs to be that awareness of, you know, what life stage is this person at, and if this is a woman, then maybe that this needs to be different. Maybe, you know, there needs to be more recovery built in, or more strength training built in. maybe less mileage, different nutrition, again, all these guidelines that we get trotted out, like how many carbs per hour, they're not relevant to women most of the time.
And they're always changing.
Yeah, so yeah, there's still a kind of a long way to go. And kit is another thing. Like shoes are still designed on men's feet. Even women's shoes. Ultimately, when it goes back to the factory, it's on machines that are designed around men's feet, and women's feet are the opposite of men's, where men's feet are narrow, women's are wider, and vice versa. So yeah, there's just kind of endless inequality still.
Yeah, and I think if you have a coach, they will try and, a good coach will try and individualize that plan, whoever you are, because they're taking into account the kind of stresses in your life and how you're fitting in running and all those kind of other things. But if someone's new to this and they go online, it's quite likely that they're just going to find a generic plan that tells them to run 6 days a week and on the seventh day do loads of strength and conditioning, and then they wonder why they're injured, like before they've even got to the race that they're doing. Like if I did that, I would be injured in a week. So it's like that trial and error. And kind of I found just kind of in the few events that I've done that actually clever training and kind of fewer miles but thinking smarter can like actually gets me through, and I'm fine and I'm getting there without getting injured. So, but like Lily says, that it's just trial and error. There isn't particular data to kind of guide that thinking. It's just like, oh, I did that last time, and how did that feel? You kind of just guessing. So yeah, I'd love to see loads more research into it.
But also, I think a lot of women, and not all women, and we can't kind of lump everyone together, but I do think a lot of the time women approach things differently to men. They approach their training perhaps more on a sense of feel than data. Like data is useful and we do need more data, but we also need to recognize that men and women operate differently. And the approach I take I only teach women, but the approach I take to them would be different to the approach I would take towards men. So I think it's learning about those kind of subtle differences of communication as well. And I think with women it can, certainly I have coached a few men in the past, and what I found with women, it's about building their confidence up. With men, it's about getting them to set realistic expectations, because they tend to go the other way. And kind of be
very, very polite by not saying that men are a bit stupid and they overtrain.
I thought that was a really nice way of saying it's about reducing their confidence level.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, men just, we tend to just do, don't we? We just get on, we just do stuff and just, even if it's to our detriment. Yeah, whereas you're right, women, think that, and that's why, a lot of the success that you see in ultras that women have, a lot of it's been put down to them making better decisions, hasn't it, in races, whereas men can make bad decisions because of ego. And what was your take on that when you were doing the research on? Because I know that I've spoken to like Sophie Power about that before, and she has sort of different opinions on why women are better at longer distance than men at times.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple aspects to that. I think one is pacing. So there's really consistent data, even from kind of marathon level distance, that women are better at pacing. Now, whether that is a psychological thing or a physiological thing, because they're just tending to go off slower because they don't have that initial power, or, I mean, my guess is that it's about testosterone that kind of gives you that like real competitive edge, and off you go. Maybe it's a mix of everything. But yeah, so pacing is one thing that's so vital in an ultra, right? Like you can't you have to know that you're doing this for an entire day or 2 days or whatever it is. So that's one aspect of it. But then, yeah, we also looked at sort of preparation and other kind of psychological factors, didn't we, Lily?
Yeah, and I think what we actually found was it's societal. Like a lot of this is societal. That, you know, there's physiological things, and you can talk about, you know, women having more efficient fat utilization and muscles being more fatigue resistant. But a lot of the reasons why women are more prepared when they go into a race is because they don't often have a chance to do many of these races. Then it's not like they can just DNF and come back another time. You know, they've had to meticulously plan their work, childcare, you know, everything down to a T so they can fit in their training and get to the start line. And also they want to feel confident enough that they can complete a race and not just going to sign up on a whim, which men do tend to do in greater numbers than women. So again, it comes back to, you know, why is it that women are less confident in their kind of physical capabilities? This goes right back to kind of, you know, early years and the messages that we give children at home and at school, and that, you know, girls are not as physically capable, they don't run as far distances in cross country, they don't see a sport as someone where they belong, and that feeds kind of all the way up to kind of ultra distances. So the women that are pushing through are probably, you know, a certain type of women in the first place to feel that they're confident enough to be able to take on these challenges. But also they make sure that they're like super prepared and that they know what they do when they get to that start line. You know, and I found that, you know, the race that I did in the Highlands a few weeks back, that you know, there were less women than men, but the women that were there were doing I think overall were doing better in the field than the men. And they were, you know, they'd done other races, they'd build up to it, they'd done specific training. There were a couple of young men who had signed up on a whim that hadn't only really done, you know, park run 6 months ago and had suddenly decided they were going to run 125k. I just don't think a woman would do that, or very few women would do that. So there is definitely something in that kind of being prepared, because it's such a huge task to kind of get to the start line.
Yeah, I wanted to go back and look at the DNF, male and female DNF at the Ultra Trail Snowdonia race recently, because my partner did that race. He's a really good ultra runner. He said that it was kind of the hardest thing he did. You know, he's done 110 milers, and he said that he did the 60-mile one, said it was the hardest thing he'd ever done. It's obviously a huge amount of elevation. He said the older, and we found this in the book as well, with age, like the older guys, and he would put himself in this category, were kind of doing a lot better, though a lot of the DNFs were kind of young men who perhaps, and I don't think there were that many women. This is the thing, because I looked at the stats on women and it was really low percentage of women on the start line of that race, but who perhaps didn't have the experience of those kind of distances or elevation, or hadn't quite realized what it would take, maybe. So yeah, I'd be meaning to go back and look, because that very low proportion of women, I'd be really interested to see how many of those actually finished, because those ones who got to that race had, you know, done the work, as it were, to get there in the first place.
You don't.
It's quite an interesting,
It's one of those races, isn't it? That is, it's feared for its technicality. So yeah, if you don't sign up to something on a whim, that is a race that you would not sign up to on a whim. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
That's interesting.
Not an entry race, is it?
It's not, no, not an entry race. But don't let that put people off. So just thinking about the book then, what for people that are gonna buy the book. Are you doing an audio version? You doing a
We keep getting asked this a lot because obviously runners
yeah,
running
like
around want to listen to it while they're running. So we completely understand. Watch this space, basically. It depends. We hope to, but we
could just
need to
record it
kind of
yourself. Just record it yourself.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it would take like
Take a
hours and
while.
hours to yeah.
It's a big book.
But yeah, so watch this space. If we do get to that point, we will obviously let everybody know. But you can obviously there's Kindle versions and you can get it anywhere you get books. We've been loving seeing like copies of it in little independent bookshops, which is always really nice to see. So yeah, maybe this is one you're gonna have to sit down and read for now.
Yeah. I mean, I've always said that the days of me sitting down and reading a book kind of went out the window when I had kids, and I used to love going on holiday and just sitting on the beach and reading a physical book, or lying by a pool with a beer or a cocktail and just reading an actual paperback book. And then when kids came along and I was too busy to be sitting down, I then transitioned to audiobooks. So everything I read or consume is 90% of it is audio versions. Yeah. Yes, I'm looking forward to when the audio version comes out. And
Yeah, we'll
I'll
let you know. Watch this space. I mean, I think one thing that I would say is we were really conscious when we were writing this book that we did not just want this to be interesting to people who were in this world, like at all. I feel like you guys almost already know it. And I think some of the nicest feedback we've had is from people, men and women, who kind of said, I wouldn't normally read this kind of book. I wouldn't normally read a sports book because it's about the stories first, and they are just kind of fascinating stories. With kind of the science and the psychology and all the other things kind of woven in to help you understand through those stories. So I think it's really accessible, um, for anyone, whether you're interested in running, cycling, swimming or not. And I think that it's been really nice to have that feedback because we were really conscious of that when we were writing it.
Yeah. What's your favorite chapters then? So for somebody, if you sort of to sell the book to somebody for somebody to read it, what chapter would you say you sort of direct people to read?
Ooh, I'd have to look what chapter. So mine is the chapter on Lyle Wilcox, who won the Trans Am race across America in 2016. For a couple of reasons, because her story is amazing and I love how enthusiastic she is. So I know nothing about kind of endurance cycling, but she's great. She's so enthusiastic. She's got a film out at the moment actually about her around the world record that she broke the women's record last year, and next year I think she just announced she's going to go for the men's one. So watch this space. And yeah, she was just kind of treated as a bit of a joke on that start line, and then just she was strategic and competitive, but she just kind of played to her strengths. And that's also the chapter where we dig into fatigue resistant muscles, which I found really interesting because I think this is where this comes into where I've found ultras so enjoyable. I was more wrecked after the road marathon that I did before I even had children, when I was younger and probably fitter than I am now, than any ultra that I've done. And it just seems to really suit my physiology to do that kind of more slow, steady, keep going, have that stamina rather than kind of all out pace for 4 hours or whatever it might be. So I was really interested to dig into that chapter. So I'm not going to give away what the chapter says, but I think that's one of my favorite ones.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, I think for me, mine is one of the swimming chapters, actually. I know this is a running podcast, but we spoke to a lady called Lynn Cox, who was really a pioneer of swimming in the 70s and 80s, did loads of world firsts, kind of worked out all these kind of weird, wonderful places to swim, and how to do it and all the logistics, and was going out and swimming in places people like never would have dreamed of. And she was doing all like in a swimming costume. She didn't put any goose fat on her or anything. She just kind of got into the water, and she was amazing at climatizing her body to the cold, basically. So she was able to swim in really, really cold water. But she was a really good way into the chapter that was looking at kind of fat stores and why women's fat stores can be advantageous, and why they're even more advantageous in swimming, particularly sort of colder open water swimming. And all these records that are held in long distance swimming are all held by women. You know, the top fastest women are 20 minutes faster than the top fastest men. You know, there is a good body of evidence there, and yet again we never hear about that. Like, we never hear that women are better at a sport than men. But Lynn was, you know, Lynn is lovely. She still swims in the ocean every day. She's in her 60s now. And you know, she went through loads of experiments because she was such a phenomenal swimmer, and they were sort of studying her, you know, back in the 70s. But again, it makes you think, you know, that was over 50 years ago, and yet how much has the science really moved on? Like, we don't still know a huge amount about women's bodies. But yeah, I think Lynn was kind of a really great character, and a really good example of kind of the strength of women.
Yeah, and I do, just to bring it back to running, I do have a lot of fondness for the so we finish and end the book with Jasmin, but we were kind of coming to the end of the book as she was doing her Barkley Marathons challenge. So we were kind of both there in kind of 100 miles apart, but like refreshing Twitter to kind of see, and just that excitement that she kind of bit, because we were both going, oh no, she's not going to make it, and then it was kind of with 90 seconds to spare. So yeah, I have the picture of her above my desk, kind of collapsed at the gate at the end, and I think yeah, and I think that was just, there was something really emotional about writing that chapter, because we got so caught up in this world, and then that was kind of bookended the book.
I was going to mention that. It's great, the fact that you begin with Jasmin doing something amazing and you end with Jasmin doing something amazing, don't you? So it's like the perfect like bookends to the story, isn't it? Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, it was a good job she did it just for our benefit, really. Never mind kind of the
convenient. Yeah. Well, you know, I wish you all the best with the book. What do you hope to sort of achieve with the book, getting it out there? What would be, you know, sort of blue sky thinking, what would be the greatest outcome of having the book published?
I think for me, it's very much a personal thing that I would just like more women to believe in themselves and believe that they can take on tough challenges and that they're enjoyable. You know, it's not about doing it to prove anything. You know, they can be really enjoyable. They can be life-changing. They can be great for your mental health. And there is a huge satisfaction and reward that comes from, you know, pushing yourself, you know, and that doesn't have to be to the absolute extreme. But yeah, for me, I think if more women kind of felt confident enough to kind of take on a bigger challenge, and be inspired by these amazing stories, then I think that would be a real win.
Yeah, I mean, that was going to be my answer, really, because I think we both know so many women who are runners, who run all the time, who really enjoy it, who say to us, oh, I couldn't ever do an ultra. And you're like, yeah, you totally could. And I think some of those have been convinced to join us at the She Races Trail Ultra Trail Series, the first event in the Peak District in August. And I think just that belief, like, you don't have to be Jasmin Paris. There's a whole world of, just like if I do a marathon, you know, I don't have to be Paula Radcliffe. There's a whole there's a whole world, but you are so, like, you're designed for this in a way. It's just about understanding what it means and what this world is. So if you have that visibility, if you can see other women doing it, then maybe you will be inspired to give it a go.
Yeah, that's great. Yes, I'd penciled that in as it's August, isn't it?
Yeah.
That event. Yeah, I thought about asking Sophie whether I could come and do a podcast from there, but then I don't know whether men are banned from it because it's all it's all female. All the checkpoints are all
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what their rules are on that, because
yeah.
presumably people will have supporters. So
Yeah, you'd think so. It's not going to be a
yeah,
complete ban on men, is there? Hopefully.
no.
No, and I think kind of obviously it's about visibility, isn't it, of women doing these things. So
Yeah.
yeah, but
I'll send
that's
her
gonna
a
be a question
message.
for Sophie.
Yeah, I'll send her a message, see what she says. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you both giving up a bit of time and coming on the podcast. And yeah, like I said, I wish you all the best with the book launch, and hopefully, it'll get out there and start changing people's opinions on what's possible.
Thank
Fingers
you.
crossed. Thank
Yeah.
you very much.
Lovely. Thanks for coming on, and thanks for listening, everybody. Appreciate you everyone tuning in. Cheers, guys. Bye.